Hi, guys, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Kara, and my co-host Taya is actually in Paris today, so she is not with me for the podcast today. She is probably about to board a plane in Paris to come back to Budapest with David, my husband, Zoe, and Gage, my other daughters. So we're having a little bit of a family reunion this week, and we're very excited. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today in our podcast is my trip this past weekend alone to Krakow, Poland. I had the privilege to spend the weekend in Krakow, and it was the first trip I took here by myself. Most other trips, or all other trips I've taken, have been with Taya or Gage or Zoe. And I was really interested to see how it would be to travel alone. I was very nervous. I've done a lot of traveling alone in the U.S., but for me, for whatever reason, this had my attention, and I was feeling a little anxious. I was getting into the city about almost 1 a.m., and I knew public transportation wasn't going to be running, so I'd have to catch a cab to get to the hostel, and just showing up in a place in the dark is kind of challenging for me anyhow. But some things about traveling alone. Number one, it was really fun to not have to worry about another person's needs or wants. That might be a little bit self-centered to say, but if I was at a store and I wanted to stay in the store for an hour and a half, or if I wanted to go walk on the bridge or go outside, it was pretty cool not having to worry about someone else's needs or wants or considerations, which was new for me, and especially as, the mother of 4. I've been a mom for the past 23 years, so being on my own is not the norm for me, where I can just come and go as I choose. I didn't have to think about a partner. I didn't have to think about a kid. I didn't have to think about a work schedule. So I really, really liked it, and I found myself, I wasn't lonely. Of course, now this is the first trip. Maybe if I have been in Europe for 8 months traveling all by myself, I would be lonely. I wasn't lonely, and I also found myself much more willing and wanting to engage conversation with strangers, which is something I do anyways. I love to talk with people, and I love a connection with an unexpected connection with a stranger, or where you just kind of break down the barrier of, I don't know you, you don't know me, so we're strangers, and you kind of make a joke, or you smile, or you catch someone's eye, or you hold a door, share a phone charger, or something like that, that just kind of brings a warmth to the connection. I love doing that. And I do it a lot when I travel in groups, but I had an opportunity to do it even more when I was traveling by myself. Because I wasn't engaged kind of in a group dynamic. I wasn't traveling within a group already. So I could just kind of, again, do as I pleased. And I'm, for better or for worse, I'm super comfortable asking people questions. And I did that a lot over the trip, and people were really nice. People were really nice, and it was weird. It was like, hey, I met these people on this tour, and they're going out to dinner, and they asked me if I wanted to join them. And it was just kind of like, yeah, that would be super fun just to have kind of a new experience. Whereas had I been traveling with Taya, maybe they would have asked the both of us, but I think it might have been a little bit different that, we were a group of a family traveling. I don't know. And maybe I wouldn't have engaged them in as much conversation because I'd be directing my conversation to Taya. And another thing I noticed traveling by myself was I had a lot more creativity running through my brain, whether it was because all of my kind of energy was directed towards what I wanted it to be, and I didn't have to kind of be distracted with conversation with my travel companions. I didn't have to have my attention brought to what they wanted to show me. I could just kind of do my own thing. And by creativity, I mean things like Sunday morning, I took a 2 or 3 hour walk around the city, and I just couldn't stop seeing beauty and seeing pictures I wanted to take. And it reminded me of like essays I wanted to write, and it reminded me of like a poem I wanted to write, or something I wanted to mail to someone, or a postcard I wanted to design, a book I wanted to design. And it could have been the caffeine, which it usually is, which is great. But I had to sit down and jot down all these ideas on the back of a map or a ticket stub in my pocket. And if I had been traveling that morning with Taya, it would have been a trade-off. I probably would not have had maybe the self-reflection and the creative juices flowing as much as I did. But what I would have had with Taya, which I've had in countless cities, is a wonderful conversation with my daughter, walking in one of the most gorgeous cities in Europe. I'll never forget the morning Taya and I got coffee and wandered Basel, Switzerland, and we ended up talking about everything under the sun, the good, the bad, the ugly, things we were scared to talk about. And it was just so, don't get me wrong, one is certainly not better than the other. It's just really different. And I was traveling, and, I wasn't a mom, and I was a woman. I was a human. I mean, I'm always a human, but I tend to see myself through the lens of being a mother when I'm with my kids. And this time I felt more like a woman, and I found it rather empowering. And, I would never felt unsafe. Quite the contrary, I felt very safe. I purposely put myself in safe situations. And at the same time, I could see myself like having opportunities to flirt with men, or to pursue a flirtation, or to see maybe, oh, I wonder if this guy would want to go out to dinner with me, or this or that, because I just had never been traveling just as a woman. I've been with Taya or Gage or my kids, and I don't think along those lines. Now, I do want to make it clear I didn't have any intention of having dinner with a man I would meet, but I did enjoy talking to people, men and women. I enjoyed flirting. I tend to flirt with men and women. I flirt with everybody. But I don't know. It was kind of nice to feel like a woman in a way, and I didn't have to worry about mothering, because even though Taya and all my kids are extremely independent and very capable, there's something when they are complaining or they are upset, there's still a part of me that hooks into thinking this is my problem to fix. And so there was none of that. Like if Taya's saying she's cold, but she doesn't want to put her gloves on her hands, it's not my problem, but it reminds me of it just feels motherish. So I still feel sometimes obligated, or my gut reaction is to try to fix whatever's going on with my kids. That's my default setting. I don't always act on it, thankfully, and I'm trying to shift as they become, some of them are adults. Devin and Gage, I feel like, are adults, and Zoe and Taya are not far behind, and it's not my place to fix and solve their problems anymore, but it's a little bit of a slippery slope right now. So that was an interesting part, and I have to share with you that part of the anxiety in going into this trip was that I knew I was going to visit. I booked a tour to visit Auschwitz and Birkenau, and I didn't do anything fancy. It was just your run-of-the-mill $40 tour where they picked me up at my hotel, and I had a guide, who's English-speaking guide, and dropped me back into the city. And I didn't know what to expect, obviously, because I've never been there. And the tour was done extraordinarily well. It was shocking just to be in the place where you see all the pictures, but the first part of the tour was an hour and a half at Auschwitz I, and it built in terms of the intensity or the horror or of what you were going to see. They started off with how, the barracks are laid out and kind of the running of the camp and living situations and numbers and it just got, as the hour and a half progressed, it got more and more intense where they would take you through exhibits of how they exploited the corpses for hair and for teeth and, gold in the teeth and blankets they would weave out of the hair. And there was definitely no mincing of words. There was no jokes, obviously. And it built to where they took us through where they would have executions, and we stood in the ground where they did roll call for 12 to 19 hours in the freezing cold. And in some parts of the tour, they asked for no pictures, almost in the most harrowing parts where they did experiments on women and twins and human beings, and where they asked no pictures and they asked that you respect a silence. And the last part of the first tour was walking through the gas chambers. And again, they asked no pictures and to respect a silence. And there was a group of us ushered into the gas chamber, and it was hard to describe. And then we walked into the crematorium and saw where they burned the corpses. And it built in intensity. I was worried how I was going to handle it, and I felt emotionally okay. I mean, there were some people crying, but I've definitely felt okay. And then after the hour and a half at Auschwitz I, we went to Birkenau, which was literally a 2-minute drive away. And Birkenau I just didn't know how enormous it was, just enormous. They took over a town and they dismantled people's homes in the town to build their own barracks. And what is really daunting, I mean, you guys can go online and see the pictures, and everybody has access to this, just where the train would come in and the platform where they would make the selection, and just to stand there was quite overpowering. And to learn, majority of the people never went into the camp at Birkenau. They went straight to the gas chambers and were murdered. And it was hard. I'm not going to lie. It was hard as someone who's lived an incredibly comfortable, privileged life, just to imagine and just to be there in the person. They've done a wonderful job whoever they is, whoever set up these museums, have done an amazing job of preserving the way things were and not sugarcoating it at all. There was no gratuitous horror. It didn't need it. It was just horror because the facts and the realness and the reality of what happened was horror enough. And I find that once I left the camps, I was tired. I mean, we walked for 3 hours. I was tired, and we were driven back into Krakow. And I went for a walk around the city center. And I went to the city center in Krakow, which I can't think of the name at the moment, but there was a huge protest going on about the war in Ukraine. And there were images of pregnant women that have been killed and babies and children. And believe it or not, that's when I lost it. I just kind of stood in the square and cried, because the atrocities that happened at the Holocaust continue, whether it's in Afghanistan or Sudan or Syria or Ukraine or China, all the places that I don't even know about. And that's where kind of I broke a little bit. And it was definitely intense for me, but it was manageable. I also knew if I needed to talk to someone or process, I had tons of friends and family who I could call and process with. Ironically, when I was hurting or when I was faced with how horrible the Holocaust was, I felt really close to my father, who passed away. My father has nothing to do with the Holocaust, but something about wherever he is and wherever those 6 million Jews are and the horror that they went through, that they're okay now, was with me. So I had, needless to say, my heart and my mind were full. And I keep going back to the tour. I'm still processing it, and I'm going to put a vlog together specifically about the tour. I posted a vlog about my time in Krakow, but I wanted to do a separate vlog for the tour I took to Auschwitz and Birkenau, simply because I feel like they're two very different parts of my weekend, and it might be a bit jarring to put them both together. So there's something I was just thinking about, though, is this idea that there's these collective horrible events in history and in current day, the dropping of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No, the dropping of the atomic bombs, horrific, the Holocaust, 9/11, there's the famine in Somalia, civil war in Sudan, like these big, huge events, COVID, the plague, all these things. I mean, God knows I'm not a historian and I'm not an expert on it, hardly anything. So I'm missing a whole bunch of big ones. But my point is this idea of these huge events versus individual acts of kindness and goodness. So there's these general events, and then versus all the small stories, the individual hearts, the individual people, the individual incidences of love and giving and sacrifice and help. And that's one thing I was thinking about a lot on my weekend, was that in and amongst the horrific things that happen in our lives on a general scale, on an international scale, on a global scale, everyday people do nice things for one another all over the place. People help each other all the time. I don't know if they counterbalance each other, but my experiences of living and traveling in Europe for the past 8 months, I have been helped by so many people, and I have been the recipient of so many acts of kindness and generosity that even on a trip where I went to visit the Holocaust Museum, I come home with my faith restored in humanity because I made a friend on the airplane. The guy I sat next to, his name is Martin. He's probably in his early 20s. He was young, and he said something that implied he had traveled a lot to Krakow, and I was feeling nervous about trying to get to my hostel at like midnight, 1 a.m. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to take the train and just follow me." And so after our flight, which we kind of kept to ourselves, we didn't chat it up the whole time, but it was very comfortable. He was like, "Follow me." And we went to the train, and it turns out we were too late for the train and the bus. So we ended up doing Uber together. And he did it all on his phone, of course, because I didn't have those apps. And we shared an Uber into town, and he's like, "I'll sit up front. You can have the back seat and feel comfortable." And when we got there, I gave him money. He said, "No, please, let me pay for it." He paid for the trip, and he wished me luck. And I tried to put some euros in his pocket, and he took it out and put it back in my backpack or my pocket. And he said, "Do me a favor and just have a lovely weekend here," which I did. And that was so powerful to me, it was so powerful to me. And I've had experiences like that almost every time I've traveled. And so I'm left with a lot of conflicting feelings, and so glad that I went to Krakow. So glad that I took the risk to travel by myself. I probably will be doing a lot more because actually Taya is planning to go back to the US about a month before I am. So I will be living and traveling for about a month by myself in Europe. And I'm so glad I went to the concentration camps. And I'm so glad that I asked questions to everyone that I did. So I'm feeling pretty grateful. And shout out to Martin, who treated me to a ride in the Uber from the airport to my hostel. Thank you, my friend. I hope all is well with you. And go to my YouTube channel to subscribe and see vlogs and posts and videos and podcasts, and hopefully there will be a lot more. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening.